Right. So today we're going to be taking a deep dive into some English vocab and idioms.
Okay.
And these are, like words and phrases that you hear and you're like, oh, that's a really cool way to say that.
Yeah.
And I wish I could use that in a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be taking our inspiration from a podcast called Unlocking English.
Okay, cool.
And we've got 4 words and phrases picked out
Okay.
that we want to look at. And those are zealous, go with the flow, zone out, and meander.
Okay, those are some good ones.
Yeah, so we're going to look at, kind of what they mean, but also like their origins
Yeah.
and maybe some memory tricks for how to remember them.
I love it.
Yeah. So let's kick things off with zealous.
Okay.
So this word, it just has this like energy to it. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
So like excitement.
Yeah, it's like passionate, but it's like more than passion.
Yeah. It's like a huge passion.
It's like a huge passion. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like you're dedicated, you're fervent,
Yeah.
you're all in.
Yeah, it's like you could be passionate about baking, but zealous is like you've quit your job and you've opened a bakery.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
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 And so the podcast that we're taking inspiration from,
Yeah.
they use the example of like an environmental advocate named Emma.
Okay.
And so she's not just like, posting on social media about it.
Yeah.
She is like out there like organizing protests and, cleaning up beaches and things like that.
Wow.
She is all in on this cause.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so this intensity like actually has historical roots.
Okay.
Yeah, so zealous, it comes from this late Latin word that means full of zeal, which itself comes from a Greek word that means burning desire.
Wow. So it's like a long history of this word meaning like really passionate.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So it's got like this weight to it, this history behind it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I got to share this memory trick that I read.
Okay.
So picture a seal, like clapping,
Uh-huh.
like really enthusiastic.
Standing ovation?
Yes, like a standing ovation.
Yeah.
So zealous, zealous.
I like it.
Yeah, it's kind of silly, but I feel like that image will stick in your mind.
Definitely.
And so then you'll remember zealous.
I'll never forget zealous.
And so, some other words that you could use that are similar
Okay.
are fervent, passionate, ardent, enthusiastic, dedicated.
So if you want to like spice it up, you can switch it out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got options.
I like it.
All right. So next up, let's talk about go with the flow.
Okay. I love that one.
Yeah. This one's like super chill.
Yeah. It's like relaxed.
Yeah. Like it's like you're not like, uptight about stuff. And you're
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
whatever happens, happens.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm just going to roll with it.
Yeah. Adaptable.
Yeah. Adaptable. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And the podcast uses the example of a road trip.
Okay.
Like, you're on a road trip with some friends and you're like, you know what? We don't need a strict itinerary.
Yeah. Just see what happens.
Yeah, we're just going to see what happens. We're going to go with the flow.
I like the.
Yeah. And so, like, obviously the metaphor there is water.
Right.
And how it just like, flows around obstacles and it just keeps
Yeah.
going.
It doesn't get stuck. It just keeps moving.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of like you're going through life and you're encountering these, obstacles or whatever.
Yeah. Right.
But you're just kind of like rolling with it. You're not getting like super hung up on it. You're just
Yeah.
like, okay, how do I navigate this? How do I move forward?
Yeah. That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah. So I'm picturing like a leaf, like floating down a stream.
Yeah.
Just like effortless.
That's a good visual.
Yeah. So that's kind of like the image I get when I hear go with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So are you ready to zone out for a sec?
Always.
Okay. So this is a phrase that I feel like we use all the time.
Yeah. Definitely.
But have you ever actually thought about like where your mind goes when you zone out?
No, not really. I guess I just think of it as like, when you're spacing out and you're not paying attention.
Right. Yeah. But like, where does it go?
Yeah.
It's kind of mystery, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
So the podcast uses the example of zoning out during like a really boring lecture,
Oh, yeah. Definitely been there.
which I think we've all done.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's basically like you're shifting your mental focus, like you're detaching from your surroundings and you're entering this like different headspace.
Yeah, so you're like not really present.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're kind of like checked out.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those mental vacations are unplanned,
Oh,
right?
yeah, definitely.
like when you really should be paying attention,
Mm-hmm.
but you just can't help but zone out.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Yeah. And so I think a good way to kind of remember this is to contrast it with zoning in.
Okay.
So when you're zoned in, you're like laser focused, right?
Right, like really concentrating.
Yes, exactly. And so zoning out is like the opposite of that. It's like you're letting your mind wander, or you're kind of spacing out, you're daydreaming.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. And some other words that are similar that you could use are daydream, drift off, space out, or lose focus.
So lots of options for zoning out.
Exactly.
Right.
All right, so should we meander our way to our last word?
Let's do it.
Okay, so meander, I love how this word is like it's a verb and a noun.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think of like winding paths.
Yeah.
And like, taking a leisurely stroll.
Yeah.
It's not like you're rushing to get somewhere.
Yeah, it's like taking the scenic route.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the example that the podcast uses is like a scenic trail
Okay.
that meanders through a forest.
I like that.
Yeah, so you're not like, trying to speed hike through it. You're just kind of like enjoying the scenery.
Yeah.
And this one has a really cool origin story.
Oh, I love those.
Yeah, so meander comes from the ancient Greek name for a river in Turkey
Oh, wow.
called the Meandros River.
Okay.
And it was known for like its winding, like kind of serpentine course.
Wow.
So like the word itself like reflects like the very concept that it embodies.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And so like a memory trick for this one is that meander rhymes with wander.
Oh, yeah.
And they both kind of imply this like aimless movement.
Yeah, like you're not really sure where you're going.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so some other words that are similar that you could use are wander, roam, ramble, drift, saunter.
Oh, those are good ones.
Yeah. So there you go. So we've covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah.
But here's what I'm wondering.
Okay.
These words are great,
Yeah.
but how do they actually help us like navigate the real world?
That's a good question.
Like, yeah, go with the flow sounds nice and everything.
Right.
But like, is there a danger of like being too passive
Mm-hmm.
if you're always just going with the flow?
Yeah.
Like, when do you need to actually like stand up for what you believe in or
Yeah.
or like make a decision,
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that's where like the deep dive comes in.
Okay.
It's not just knowing the definition of these words, but
Right.
it's also like understanding the nuance and knowing when to apply these words and these phrases in a way that really elevates your communication.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So it's about like using them strategically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And making sure they're actually serving you in your communication.
Okay, cool. So I guess we've got some more thinking to do.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've got these 4 awesome words. Zealous, go with the flow zone out, and meander. But I think the challenge is like knowing when to use them, right? Like how do you actually weave them into a conversation without sounding like you're trying too hard?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think
Yeah.
it's about being mindful and intentional with your language. Like, think of these words as tools in your communication toolkit. You wouldn't use a hammer for every DIY project, right?
Right. You wouldn't use a hammer to screw in a light bulb.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's about choosing the right word for the right situation
Yeah.
and understanding the subtle nuances of each word, like you mentioned, the potential pitfalls of going with the flow. It's not about being a pushover or lacking direction. It's about recognizing when flexibility is key.
So it's about knowing when to hold firm to your convictions and when to adapt to changing circumstances.
Exactly. And I think the same applies to zealous. While passion is great, there's a fine line between being enthusiastic and being overbearing.
Oh, that's a good point. Like you could be zealous about a new diet, but if you're constantly lecturing your friends about it, they might start avoiding you.
Exactly. So it's about finding that balance, expressing your passion without overwhelming others.
And what about zone out? Surely there are times when it's not okay to zone out, right? Like during a surgery or while flying a plane.
Definitely context is key, but I think there's also a misconception that zoning out is always a bad thing. Sometimes letting your mind wander can actually be beneficial for creativity and problem solving.
So it's like giving your brain a break, allowing it to make connections that it might not have made otherwise.
Exactly. And even meandering can have its time and place. Sometimes taking the indirect route can lead to unexpected discoveries and insights.
It's like if you're brainstorming a new project, sometimes it's helpful to just let your ideas flow freely, to meander down different paths and see where they lead.
Precisely. So I think the key takeaway here is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to language. It's about understanding the nuances of each word and phrase and using them in a way that enhances your communication and reflects your unique voice.
I love that. So we're not just learning vocabulary, we're learning how to wield language with intention and purpose.
Exactly. And that's a powerful skill to have.
So we've talked about these words and like all the little details of them and how they can be like really useful for talking to people.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of curious, like how would they actually work in like a real conversation?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it might help to like imagine some, situations where these words would be like really good to use.
Okay, so like let's play a game.
Okay.
You give me a situation and then we can try to like figure out how we would like slip in one of these words.
Okay. I like it. Okay, how about this? You're trying to get one of your friends to try out a new hobby with you, like something they've never done before.
Oh, okay. Um, I would probably start by like emphasizing how much I love this hobby, like how zealous I am about it.
Yeah, perfect. You could say something like, I've been so zealous about